Some of the things he could have pointed to were fossil record. This is a baleen whale. If you look at the fin of a baleen whale, it almost looks exactly like the bone structure in the human arm, which suggests that both I and the whale have a common ancestor that had bone structure similar to like that.
Okay, did you catch the two things there? First of all, he says that the bone structure in the fin of the baleen whale has the same structure as a human hand. That's true, isn't it? You can see that. You can see that there are 5 lots of bones in the fin of the baleen whale, and there are 5 lots of bones in my hand. So that observation is true. He then went on to say that suggests that they have evolved from a common ancestor. Does it really? No, it does not. And I think children ought to be taught this. And the young people here need to follow this next point, because actually that principle is illogical and actually disobeys the laws of logic. It particularly falls foul of a particular law of logic known as the affirmation of the consequent. Affirmation of the consequent is a logical fallacy. Let me explain how it works. Here's a logical sequence of statements. There's 2 statements, P and Q. If P is correct, then Q is correct. So P basically implies Q. Statement 2 is that P is correct, so statement 3 means therefore Q must be correct. That is logical. The opposite is illogical, where it says if P is correct, then Q is correct. Statement 2 says, well, Q is correct. Statement 3 says that proves P is correct. Now, it's a bit hard to get this with P's and Q's, so let me give you a real-life example. Supposing we say, if it's raining, then the streets are wet. That's the first statement. If it's raining, the streets are wet. Second statement says, it's raining. So the third logical conclusion is, therefore the streets are wet. Are you happy with that? That's logical. If it's raining, then the streets are wet. It's raining, therefore the streets are wet. Okay? That's logical. But supposing we didn't say that, supposing we put it this way round, supposing we said, if it's raining, then the streets are wet. Statement 2 is, the streets are wet. I've observed the streets are wet. Therefore, it's raining. Is that logical? If the streets are wet, does that prove it's raining? No, because there could be an alternative reason why the streets are wet. For example, there could be a burst water pipe, and that could have made the streets wet. So you cannot say that it's raining just because the streets are wet. That would be an affirmation of the consequent, and it's illogical. Now, just bear with me for a few seconds. Let me give you a logical statement about evolution. If evolution were true, then you would expect to see similarities in anatomy. Now, that doesn't mean I'm conceding that evolution's true. I'm just saying this is logical. If evolution were true, you would expect to see similarities in anatomy. So a logical statement would be to say, number 2, evolution is true, therefore that proves that you have similarities in anatomy. That would be logical. It's false because I don't believe evolution's true, but it would be logical. But what they have done is actually like this. They've done it the wrong way round. They've said, if evolution were true, then you would expect to see similarities in anatomy. Second statement is, you see similarities in anatomy, therefore evolution is true. That is illogical. You cannot use that as a proof of evolution, because there could be an alternative explanation as to why you have similarities in anatomy. For example, here are 2 cars made by the Chevrolet Motor Company. They're not the same model. I've forgotten which models they are because I'm not very good at cars. If my wife was here, being a fan of the program Top Gear, especially the British version, she would tell you immediately what models these were. Probably some of you would be able to tell. But they are different models. But do they look similar? They have some similarities, don't they? Can you see the radiator grille looks the same at the hood there? The headlights are quite similar. They are very similar in their anatomy. This proves that these 2 cars evolved from a common ancestor, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Have you all gone to sleep? Does this prove that these 2 cars evolved from a common ancestor? Of course it doesn't. They didn't evolve at all. They came from a common design team. And so the fact that the whale's fin looks like a human hand offers no proof whatsoever that evolution is true. We know why they look similar, because they were both designed by the same designer.